You would think that the moment a police officer shows up, the moment someone in a uniform, carrying authority, representing the full weight of the law, walks through a door or steps into a hallway, that most people would take a breath, recalibrate, at least pause. You would think. But tonight's cases are about what happens when certain parents don't pause. When the instinct to protect their child, or more accurately, the instinct to protect themselves from the consequences of their child behavior, overrides every rational thought, every consideration of what happens next, and every shred of self-preservation that should have kicked in long before things went as far as they went. Point one of tonight's stories takes place in a middle school hallway in Deltona, Florida. It involves a school resource deputy, a battery charge against an 11-year-old boy, and two parents who walked into a meeting with that deputy and walked out in handcuffs, having punched her in the head, knocked her to the ground, and ripped the weapon from her hands, while their son watched, while she was just doing her job. The other story takes place in a quiet residential neighborhood in Farmington Hills, Michigan. It involves a woman, her two children, a 911 call made by one of those children, and the man in their home who responded to the arrival of police by aiming an AK-47 at the officers through the front door. Both stories are real. Both are documented on body camera footage. Both have outcomes that nobody in that school hallway or that Michigan neighborhood expected when the day began. And both of them ask the same fundamental question: what happens to the people around a parent who completely loses control? Let's get into it. Deltona Middle School, Volusia County, Florida, November 19th. 2024 Deltona Middle School is a public school serving about 30 miles northeast of Orlando in Volusia County, Florida. It's a normal school, the kind that exists in every mid-sized American city. Hallways, lockers, the noise and motion of hundreds of kids navigating the ordinary social terrain of being 12 and 13 years old. And on Monday, November 18th, 2024, one of those kids, an 11-year-old boy attending Deltona Middle, shoved a girl in a school hallway. It wasn't a complicated incident. A boy pushed a girl. The school took it seriously, as it should. The school resource deputy assigned to Deltona Middle, Deputy Julia Cutton of the Volusia County Sheriff's Office, was involved in processing the matter as part of her role on campus. The boy was charged with battery for shoving the girl at school the previous day. It was a civil citation, not a criminal charge, as a Volusia County Sheriff would later stress repeatedly at a press conference. And that distinction matters, because what happened next was not a response to anything serious being done to this child. It was a response to a civil citation, a piece of paper, a consequence that was, in the grand scheme of things, minor. The boy's parents, 46-year-old Jorge Rivera and 45-year-old Dagmaria Ponte Torino, were called into the school the following morning, Tuesday, November 19th. A meeting was scheduled with Deputy Cutton to discuss the situation. Volusia County Sheriff Mike Chitwood would later say bluntly, "I cannot stress enough, a civil citation is not a criminal charge. There's no reason I have a deputy at home with a concussion for something so trivial." He was right. There was no reason. But it happened anyway. Body camera footage released by the Volusia County Sheriff's Office shows a 3-minute meeting between the parents and Deputy Cutton inside her office at Deltona Middle School. Rivera in particular appears aggressive in demeanor from the very start. He quickly tells the deputy that she is failing kids. As he continues to talk over her and point his finger at her face, she gets up and calmly tells him they need to leave. "Why are you this worthless? Do you feel proud that you are this worthless?" Rivera says, while still in the office, as his wife appears to try and hold him back, "Let that sentence land. A grown man, in a school, talking to a deputy who had done absolutely nothing to him or his family except administer a standard civil citation process, calling her worthless. To her face, in her own office. According to an arrest report, Rivera had become angry during the meeting in part after the deputy told the parents that another student would not face charges for throwing a shoe at their son, who was also in the office during the confrontation. There was more than one issue on the table. The son had been involved in more than one incident. The deputy was trying to explain, in a calm and measured way, why the school had made the decisions it had made. Rivera didn't want explanations. He wanted a different outcome. And when he didn't get it, something in him shifted from frustration into something else entirely. Deputy Cutton asked the family to leave. They began walking out into the hallway, and then, without warning, everything changed at eye in the hallway, with the couple's son present and watching. The attack happened. Iturrino moved first. She placed herself between the deputy and her husband and shoved Deputy Cutton hard into the wall. In the second that followed, Rivera stepped in. He punched Deputy Cutton in the head. He punched her again. She went down. And then, as she lay on the ground, Rivera reached down and ripped her taser from her holster. Think about what just happened that a school resource deputy was just assaulted in a middle school hallway. She has been knocked to the ground. The man who knocked her down is now standing over her with her own taser in his hand, and their son is watching all of this. An 11-year-old child. Watching his parents beat a deputy to the ground and disarm her in a school hallway that a hate crime enhancement was later added to some of Rivera's charges because of a derogatory slur he called the deputy just before the attack began. Deputy Julia Cutton, lying on the ground with a concussion, did something that deserves to be recognized clearly. She did not panic. She did not freeze. She managed to get back to her feet, draw a firearm, and order Rivera to drop the taser. He complied. She placed him in handcuffs. She then allowed paramedics to treat her and was later taken to a hospital for concussion symptoms. She was assaulted, knocked down, disarmed, and she still controlled the scene. She still brought him into custody. In a school hallway, in front of children, Volusia County Sheriff Mike Chitwood, who reviewed the body camera footage, did not mince his words at his press conference. "To say I'm furious is beyond," he said. "There's no reason I have a deputy with a concussion for something so trivial." And then he said something that cut straight to the heart of this entire story. If you're wondering why some kids show no fear of consequences in today's society, look no further than these parents. One sentence, and it answered a question that teachers, administrators, school resource officers, and anyone who works with children have been asking for years. The charges, the irony, the aftermath. Both Rivera and Iturrino were arrested. Rivera faced charges of battery on a law enforcement officer, resisting arrest with violence, disrupting a school function, trespassing on a school campus, robbery with a weapon, grand theft, and a hate crime enhancement on several charges. Iturrino faced battery on a law enforcement officer, resisting arrest with violence, disrupting a school function, and trespassing on a school campus. Think about the progression of that Tuesday morning. They came to protest a civil citation, a minor piece of paper. Their son, who shoved a girl in a hallway the day before, was sitting in that meeting watching his parents handle a school disciplinary situation. They left in handcuffs, both of them, facing felony charges, having committed, in front of their own child, exactly the kind of impulsive, violent behavior that starts with someone deciding that the rules don't apply to them and ends in handcuffs on a linoleum floor. Sheriff Chitwood later noted the additional irony. Iturrino was employed by the Volusia County School District as a VPK, voluntary pre-kindergarten, teacher. A woman who worked teaching young children had just assaulted a deputy in the school and was now under investigation by the very school district she worked for. Chitwood said he was working to get both of their bonds revoked after they were initially released. And the boy, the 11-year-old who had shoved a girl in a hallway and been given a civil citation, watched his parents turn that small, manageable consequence into a criminal situation from which there was no easy recovery. The lesson he witnessed that Tuesday morning was not the one any school is equipped to undo. To the bigger picture from a school hallway here is what Sheriff Chitwood was really saying when he pointed to these parents as an explanation for why some kids show no fear of consequences. The IT is not complicated. Children learn what they live. They watch the adults closest to them handle frustration, authority, and the experience of consequences they don't like. And when the adults they are watching respond to a civil citation by punching a deputy in the head in the school hallway, that child's internal map of how the world works is being written right in front of them. Deputy Cutton handled an extraordinarily dangerous moment with composure that most people would struggle to find even in much less extreme circumstances. She had been knocked to the ground. She had been disarmed. She could have escalated. She had every legal justification to do so. Instead, she got up, drew a firearm, gave a clear command, and restored order. That is professional. That is trained. That is what years of preparation for exactly this kind of unpredictable, irrational encounter looks like when it works. And yet, the fact that those years of training were necessary, the fact that a school resource deputy needed the full weight of a preparation to survive a parent-teacher conference, is a part that lingers. How many school resource officers have had similar encounters that didn't make the news? How many teachers and administrators go to work every day knowing that a meeting with an angry parent carries a risk that is entirely separate from whatever the child has actually done? As Chitwood himself put it, It goes to show you what teachers and administrators are dealing with out-of-control parents. Farmington Hills, Michigan, September 15th, 2024, 11:54 a.m. Now we go somewhere very different. Not a school hallway, a residential street in a suburban Michigan neighborhood on a Sunday morning. Kids playing, neighbors going about their weekend. The ordinary piece of a mid-sized Midwestern city on a September morning. And in a house on Morning View Drive, near Middlebelt and 12 Mile Roads, something violent was already underway. A child at the home called 911. It was the child of the woman living there. She called because a man, 32-year-old DeJuan Patrick Evans, was assaulting her mother inside the house. He was threatening to kill her in front of her children. That is where this story starts, with a child picking up a phone and calling for help because the adult in her home was hurting her mother. Officers from the Farmington Hills Police Department responded at approximately 11:30 a.m. When they arrived, they were met outside by the victim, the woman Evans had been assaulting. She was distraught. She told officers that she had been attacked, that her children were still inside the house, and that Evans was armed with a gun. 2 children, inside, with a man they had just watched assault their mother, and a gun. The officers didn't take a moment to weigh their options. Without hesitation, they entered the home to rescue the children, announcing their presence multiple times. That phrase, without hesitation, is worth sitting with. These officers had just been told by a domestic violence victim that the man inside was armed. They went in anyway, because there were children inside, because a child had called 911, because that's what the job requires. Inside the home, the officers encountered Evans concealing his hands behind a door frame. They gave him multiple commands to show his hands. He refused to comply. And then Evans aimed an AK-47 rifle directly at the officers. An AK-47, inside a house in a suburban Michigan neighborhood, pointed at first responders who had come to protect a woman and her children. An officer discharged their weapon in self-defense. The officers then quickly fled the home as Evans opened fire, pursuing them out of the house and continuing to shoot as they ran, forcing them to take cover in a neighboring garage and behind vehicles in the street. This was no longer a domestic violence call. This was an active shooting situation in the middle of a residential neighborhood on a Sunday morning. Officers took cover and called for backup from multiple agencies, including the Oakland County Sheriff's Office. As they contained the perimeter, they learned that Evans had barricaded himself inside the home and that the 2 children were still in there with him. The same children the officers had come to rescue, still inside, with a man who had just fired an AK-47 at police and driven them off the property. Evans was reportedly trying to break into the room where the children had barricaded themselves in an upstairs bedroom. He was trying to get to the children who were hiding from him in his own home, while he was simultaneously shooting at the officers trying to rescue them. The neighborhood becomes a battlefield over the course of the standoff. Evans continued to fire at the officers and their vehicle from inside the home. Round from his high-powered rifle struck multiple neighboring homes and apartments, as well as 5 police vehicles. Bullets came close enough to officers taking cover behind those vehicles to constitute near misses. 5 police vehicles, multiple houses, a suburban Michigan neighborhood on a Sunday morning, with round from an AK-47 tearing through walls and windows of homes where families were going about their lives. Negotiators from both the Farmington Hills Police Department and the Oakland County Sheriff's Office SWAT team made repeated contact with Evans. They contacted the suspect numerous times, but were unable to convince him to surrender peacefully. He wasn't coming out. And then, at some point during the standoff, the children found their own way out. The children, ages 8 and 14, had barricaded themselves in an upstairs bedroom. Evans was trying to get to them, but they managed to escape the house on their own, slipping out while Evans was occupied and running to safety. An 8-year-old and a 14-year-old, escaping on their own from a house where the man who was supposed to be a father figure was actively trying to break through the door they were barricading themselves behind. When they got out, when officers confirmed the children were safe, the final phase of the standoff began. Evans appeared at the front door with his rifle. He aimed it at the officers outside. An Oakland County Sheriff's Office SWAT sniper fired 1 shot and incapacitated him. Police immediately rendered aid to Evans. He was transported to a local hospital in critical but stable condition. He was taken into custody and placed under police guard. The entire standoff, From the moment officers first entered the house to the moment the SWAT sniper's single shot ended the immediate threat, had stretched over several hours. Hours during which a quiet suburban neighborhood was punctuated by rifle fire, during which 5 police vehicles were hit, during which 2 children hid behind a bedroom door while a man tried to break through it. And no officers were struck. None of the neighbors were hit. The children were safe. The charges reflect the reality. On September 16, 2024, the day after the standoff, Oakland County Prosecutor Karen McDonald filed charges against DeJuan Patrick Evans. The initial filing included 13 felony counts, 3 counts of assault with intent to murder, 2 counts of felonious assault, 1 count of firearm possession by prohibited person, 6 counts of felony firearm, second or subsequent offense, and 1 count of domestic violence. And then investigators kept working. Following Evans's arraignment in early October, the Farmington Hills Police Department presented additional information to the prosecutor's office. 6 more felony charges were authorized, 3 additional counts of assault with intent to murder, and 3 additional counts of felony firearm. Evans now faced a total of 18 felonies and 1 misdemeanor. 18 felonies, stemming from one Sunday morning. If convicted on the assault with intent to murder charges alone, Evans faced up to life in prison. Oakland County Prosecutor Karen McDonald said in her statement, "Law enforcement rushed into imminent danger, putting their own lives on the line to save the lives of the victim and her children. I commend the quick thinking of law enforcement in bringing this extremely dangerous situation to an end." Farmington Hills Police Chief Jeff King added, "I'm extremely proud of the heroic actions of the women and men of the Farmington Hills Police Department. They were calm and courageous in the face of extreme danger. When encountering this danger, they relied upon their outstanding training that allowed them to safely stop the violence while protecting the innocent. Their actions saved the lives of the victims and brought safety to the neighboring community. I commend the officers who, even under constant fire from the suspect, remained focused on the 2 minor children trapped inside the home." Under constant fire, still focus on the children. That is a sentence that defines what those officers did on Morning View Drive. Who called 911 and why it matters. Before we move on, let's go back to the beginning of the Farmington Hills story for a moment, because there's a detail in the opening moments of this case that deserves more attention than it usually gets in the crime coverage. A child called 911. The victim's child alerted 911 after Evans allegedly assaulted the woman and threatened her life in front of the children. That child, who was inside a house with a violent adult, watching that adult assault their mother, made a decision to find a phone and call for help. That decision is the reason any of this ended as well as it did. It is a reason the Farmington Hills Police Department showed up when they did. It is a reason the children were found and ultimately escaped before Evans could get to them. It is a reason the woman who had been assaulted got out of that house while she still could. A child called 911 and saved lives, including, in all likelihood, their own. How old were these children? The youngest was 8 years old. The oldest was 14. An 8-year-old in a house with an armed, violent man decided to call the police. We talk a lot about police training and response and protocol in cases like this, and rightly so. But the decision made by that child, the instinct to call, to act, to reach for help rather than freeze, that decision is what opened the door for everything else. What these 2 cases share: a middle school in Florida, a residential street in Michigan. 2 situations that look completely different on the surface. One involves a parent-teacher meeting. The other involves an AK-47 and a SWAT team. But here's what both of these cases have in common at their core. In both of them, law enforcement officers showed up to do their jobs, to manage a situation, to apply the training they had spent years developing to a moment that required calm, professionalism, and courage. In both of them, an adult, a parent figure, responded with violence that was wildly disproportionate to anything that was happening. A civil citation for shoving became a concussion and a stolen taser. A domestic violence response became a 90-minute standoff with an AK-47 and holes in 5 police vehicles and the walls of neighboring homes. And in both cases, the children present witnessed every second of it. The 11-year-old at Deltona Middle School watched his parent assault and disarm a deputy in a school hallway. The 8 and 14-year-old in Farmington Hills spent the standoff barricaded in an upstairs bedroom while the man downstairs tried to break through their door and fired a rifle at the people who came to rescue them. These children did not choose any of this. They did not ask to be placed at the center of these situations. They were simply there, in a school, in a home, when an adult they depended on decided to respond to authority with violence. And the question that these two cases leave open, the question that has no clean answer, is what those children carry forward from what they witnessed. What version of the world got written into them on those 2 days? What does the 11-year-old in Florida understand now about how his parents see authority? About what happens when you don't get the outcome you want from a meeting? What does the 8-year-old in Michigan, old enough to call 911, old enough to barricade a door, old enough to run when the opportunity came, understand now about safety, about home, about what it means when the person who is supposed to protect you is the person you are hiding from? These are not questions the criminal justice system can fully answer. The charges, the convictions, the sentences, they address the adults. They do not address what got deposited in those children on those days. The officers themselves, Deputy Julia Cutton, went to work on a Tuesday morning in November 2024 to be a school resource officer. She sat down in her office with two parents to discuss a civil citation. She was punched in the head, knocked to the ground, and had her weapon taken from her. And then she got back up, drew her firearm, took control of the scene, and put Jorge Rivera in handcuffs. She was treated for concussion symptoms on site. She was taken to the hospital, and the entire Volusia County Sheriff's Department had to reckon with the fact that one of their deputies had just been seriously injured in a middle school during a meeting about a shove in a hallway. Sheriff Chitwood publicly praised Deputy Cutton for her calm, effective response to a violent attack. Calm, effective, in the face of something that was neither calm nor warranted. And the officers in Farmington Hills, the ones who entered their house on Morning View Drive without hesitation, who ran out of their house as rifle rounds followed them into the street, who spent hours taking cover behind vehicles that were being hit by AK-47 fire, who never stopped trying to get those children out. They went home that Sunday evening. No officers were injured. No members of the public were struck. Those outcomes did not happen by accident. They happened because of training, because of courage, because of the specific kind of composure that the job demands even when every human instinct says to run further and faster from a man with a rifle. Chief King said it clearly. They were calm and courageous in the face of extreme danger. That is what shows up in the body camera footage from both of these cases. Not just the violence, not just the danger, but the officers standing in the middle of it, doing the job, staying present, staying focused, in moments that would have broken most people. Final reflection, there's a version of this story that is simply about two outrageous incidents. A parent who punched a deputy, a man who fired an AK-47 at first responders, shocking bodycam footage, viral news clips. But the deeper story, the one that stays with you after the footage stops, is about what law enforcement officers walk into on any given shift. What is waiting behind the door they knock on? What kind of situation can turn from routine to catastrophic in the space of 3 minutes in a school hallway or 30 seconds at a front door? They don't know. They can never fully know. And they walk in anyway. Deputy Julia Cutton didn't know that a civil citation conversation was going to end with her on the floor with a concussion. The Farmington Hills officers didn't know that a domestic violence call was going to end with an AK-47 pointing at them from inside a doorway. They showed up. They did their jobs. And when it went wrong, when the situation escalated past anything they could have predicted, they relied on their training, their composure, and each other. Both situations ended with the right people in custody. Both ended without the worst possible outcome for the officers involved. Both ended with charges that carried the potential for serious prison time for the people responsible. And both ended with children who will carry what they saw, and in some cases, what they did for the rest of their lives. The 8-year-old who called 911, the 14-year-old who helped barricade that bedroom door, the 11-year-old who watched his parents handcuffed in a school hallway. None of them will forget any of it, and what they do with what they witnessed, what those moments build in them or break in them or teach them, is a part of these stories that doesn't make the arrest report, that doesn't fit in a charge sheet, that doesn't get resolved when the gavel comes down. It lives in them, long after the cameras stop rolling. I want to hear from you on these two cases before you go. The Florida case raises a question that I think deserves a real answer in the comments. Is this a parenting problem, a society problem, or something else entirely? Sheriff Chitwood said it directly. If you want to know why some kids show no fear of consequences, look at what their parents just did in a school hallway. Do you agree with that? Or is it more complicated? And in the Michigan case, the detail that keeps hitting me is the child who called 911, an 8-year-old in a house with a violent adult who found a phone and made that call. That call is what started the chain of events that kept everyone alive. What does that tell us about what we should be teaching children about when and how to call for help? Drop your answers in the comments. I genuinely want this community's perspective on both questions. If this episode stayed with you, share it, because Deputy Julia Cutton deserved to finish that meeting and go home without a concussion. Because the woman in Farmington Hills deserved to get out of that house without her children spending 90 minutes hiding behind a bedroom door. They deserve better. And the least we can do is make sure the people who put themselves between us and moments like these are seen for what they actually do. This has been Behind the Crime. Subscribe if you're not already with us. And we will see you in the next one.